Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next The Dragon Prince video. This is going to be my review for the new Dragon Prince novelization that's just come out. The Dragon Prince Book 2 Sky. So obviously that is the name of the second season of the show. This is just the novelization, the book version of the same content. Obviously, like last year, they released the Book 1 Moon novelization, which I also did a video on. I will say straight away, I wasn't initially planning on getting this, just because I didn't really feel that the first book impressed me enough as a novel in terms of what it added. But I was sort of just getting like into this sort of mood of just like, I kind of want more Dragon Prince content, but there's no real news about when the next season's coming. This book is coming out, I'll just pick it up. At least it'll be a video to talk about as we hopefully build up to some new stuff happening. And ultimately, it was fine. It was interesting. At the very least, it refreshed me on the events of Book 2 Sky. I read a lot of this while, rewatching season 2 on Netflix. Just to make sure, like, okay, what is new, what isn't new. But ultimately what I'd say about it is just that, like the first book, the additions, because it's a novel, are still rather subtle. There's not a ton extra here, and most of it is just, because it is a novel, there is narration. You get more scenes inside the characters' heads, which reveals their intent more so than the show does, because the show doesn't do sort of internal monologue, dialogue that much. Beyond that, the main, I think, thing that they're consistent with the first book that they're adding is that it feels like there's like a concerted effort to make Viren just a little bit more nuanced. Now, he's obviously presented as, being a complicated character in the show. They just go like the extra step in the books to make that clear. And that a lot of that comes from just the fact that the Viren scenes, you do get to see what he's thinking in those scenes, and so it kind of confirms his true thoughts on certain things as you go through the scenes. And that's fine. The main additions are basically just stuff that feels like it's there to set the stage for, I think, what's going to be the third graphic novel, the third comic series, which I think is going to focus on what happened in the past with Viren that caused the family to break apart, which basically what caused the mother, Lissa, to leave. That, I think, is what the third graphic novel puzzle box is going to be about. And basically, it's just that there are a few extra references here, where there's scenes where Viren is on his own and he thinks about his wife, and then they just clarify some of the details surrounding it, that he hadn't seen Lissa in years. For the past decade, all Viren needed to get him through the day was dark magic and a few cups of hot brown morning potion. Just, missing his wife, like wishing she was here. So getting across that, okay, it's been in or around 10 years ago that this happened. This event was, of course, briefly touched on in the first book, where Soren, when he was younger, was very, very ill. And the first, I suppose, time that Viren used dark magic that really, really affected him, like drained his life force, it was to fix this, and because of that, or the events surrounding that, Lissa left. And they just kind of covered that a little bit more here, which is kind of cool. The other thing is that they mention Viren's master a little bit more, and again, I think this is set up for that third graphic novel, and it's his master. The name is KPP apostrophe A-or, so Kapar or something like that. And again, it's mentioned his puzzle house. There's a scene with Claudia towards the end. She says here, she remembered as a small child accidentally eavesdropping on an argument Viren was having with the Old One. She had snuck into Kapar's puzzle house and was hiding in one of the passages when she overheard the angry yelling. She could hear her father shouting at Kapar, "I will do anything to protect my family, however dangerous, however vile." Little Claudia was scared, but she knew her father loved them more than anything. And obviously this is happening as, I suppose, you get, again, a slightly addition of a scene here, which is that we obviously know at the end of season 2, Claudia killed an animal, and killing that animal is what helped to cure Soren of his paralysis, basically. We find out here that, of course, she had Ezran lead her out to where these animals were. She then separated one of the fawns, young deers, from the herd, and it shows much more, emotionally and so on, how she actually killed this deer, and that it's sad she didn't necessarily want to do it, and she has to, literally sort of break the thing's neck and kill it that way. And she's tearing up during this whole thing. It is a kind of brutal series of events, but she's doing it to save Soren. So it's just that idea of, okay, the dark magic, here's what exactly she did. That would be a pretty brutal scene to show in animation, but it's something you can do in the book. Stuff like that I wish they did a little bit more, in that scene felt like that's a proper addition. And it makes sense in that case. Like, yeah, they're not going to show that in animation. Claudia, like, snapping a deer's neck and basically, choking it out until it dies in her arms. I get that. But there definitely should have been, I just felt like, a few extra little moments. And there's other stuff, like towards the end when Viren eventually goes through with the kind of Aravos' plan. He thinks about Claudia and how, he's warned her about, don't go too far with dark magic because it does take a toll on you, and he hopes she never has to go as far as he has. And again, it's just that thematic thing that's there in the show. It's just hit a little bit harder here because you get it from Viren's perspective. He cares about Claudia and doesn't want her to take dark magic too far. That he is willing to use it when needed to do what has to be done, but he doesn't want her to do it. But it's very clear she is now doing that exact same thing. So she's taking the same path as he is. So there's that. And look, if you're a big Viren fan and you want extra depth, sure, that's probably the main thing that you're going to get from this, is just a little bit of extra nuance on Viren as a character through those scenes. Beyond that, it's just small, tiny little things of just like, if extra clarification that you get here because the narration has to explain what's going on rather than the animation just showing it. So it clarifies a few things, but that's really about it. It's a 300 plus page novelization, and there's really only a handful of extra little bits. The main bits I mentioned, like just there going through it. Everything else is just a pretty accurate portrayal of the events of this book. More or less, line for line, scene for scene. The order of scenes is a bit different. I did notice that because, like I said, I was literally, the first half of this book I was watching as I was like, had the episodes on in the background. And you get moments like, actually, like in the show, they had a Viren scene in between this and this, but they just, in the book, they ordered the scenes slightly differently. So it's one of those things. It doesn't particularly matter. In terms of a visual perspective with the book, it is kind of cool because, of course, you do get the new kind of cover piece of art, which is kind of nice. Nice piece of art on the sort of inside as well. There's this other stuff here, like, there's kind of like a, what's the best way to say it? Just like a bit of a sort of story that's sort of telling for each of the book titles. For Sky here, it was a big world and sometimes it felt daunting. The girl was the granddaughter of the famous inventor who had built wings out of wax, and so she knew the warning story better than anyone. It was a story of how her uncle had died because he didn't listen to grandfather's warnings not to fly too high, and so the wings melted and he flew too close to the sun. The girl told her mother that she wanted to fly more than anything, but her mother and all the other adults told the girl it was too dangerous. They told her over and over, remember the warning story. Nevertheless, she persisted. The girl found the old wax wings, which had been hidden away. The wax was strong enough to hold the feathers, but the hot sun would melt the wax. So the girl strengthened the wax by adding her strongest glue, which would stay solid even in the heat. When the others saw her wearing the new and improved wings, they yelled at her to stop. "You'll fly too high," they said. Were they afraid she would fail, or they were afraid she would succeed? With some luck and a strong breeze, the girl flapped her wings. Soon she was airborne, soaring through the sky. She felt so free, and from high up there, the world looked smaller. Not small, but just the right size. And the girl knew she could do anything, even change it. And they had a similar little story like this at the start of the Moon book as well. The only other visual thing here is, of course, the pages are just normal. But then, of course, this is the book that has the first section of the big flashback, showing the whole Magma Titan fight, and then Thunder killing the three queens, of course. So when you go into the flashback, you actually get, the pages are kind of slightly different. It's kind of like dark, sort of fading into light. And you can see just from the sort of spine of the book that section is sort of darker as well. They do a similar thing with Callum's sort of visions that he has towards the end, where he doesn't go ahead with doing dark magic, and then also the same scene where he basically discovers the Sky Arcanum. In this case, it's a full sort of just kind of reverse kind of color page here with the white text, which is kind of cool, and obviously it's the same here as well. But yeah. Other than that, it is just book 2 Sky. So in terms of a recommendation, it's like, if you liked the first book, this is roughly more of the same. I wouldn't say there's any significant difference in approach here, where they add in so much more content or less content. It's basically just the same, just for book 2 Sky. I was wondering, will they give extra scenes with the backstory? But for the most part, they didn't really. There was one kind of slight instance that I don't think was in the show, which was, I suppose, maybe just making the scene play out a little bit more realistically, with the whole the Queens of Durin come asking for aid, but Katalis is also struggling. So you get this moment where, before they even come up with the plan, Harrow is planning to just give some of the grain that Katalis has to the queens. But in the meantime, they figured out that things aren't so good in Katalis either. They refuse, and then they kind of come together to realizing that the plan, Viren's plan, is the only kind of real thing. And then there's other little stuff like that. You get the idea of, they present much more sort of bluntly, because they literally sort of call it that, the idea that, the three key characters are, of course, Viren, Harrow, and Sarai. Viren is, of course, the kind of realist. This is how it is. This is the way we do things. Harrow is the idealist, and then Sarai is sort of the kind of optimistic realist, kind of somewhere in the middle. Just that dynamic, of course. Again, is it a proper edition, or is it just slightly rewording things? It's up to you about how much you interpret a lot of this stuff as being extra information. I think there's a sort of little bit of interest in this purely because there hasn't been any Dragon Prince stuff in quite a while. I know there's the role-playing game and the board game stuff that's been happening recently, but in terms of proper extra new content, things have been pretty light, because SDCC came and went, and they had the whole thing of hey, we have this panel where we're going to give you behind-the-scenes information. Don't expect any Season 4 information, but we're going to give you teases about Season 4, and it being what? So there was Season 4 information. And it's just this weird thing of what you meant was that this panel wasn't going to reveal the release date and have a trailer for Season 4, but they did do minor teases for Season 4. They're kind of puzzly type things to figure out this puzzle and you'll have an idea about what one of the kind of plot elements is going to be. I think they showed off one new character and basically just presented the idea that probably NYCC will be when they actually reveal that information, because they absolutely need to. By the time we get to New York Comic Con in like October, it's going to be, I think, just a month short of 2 years since season 3 of The Dragon Prince came out on Netflix. It's been a really, really long break, and they absolutely need to deliver. They can't have this thing get so delayed that like that goes into like 2.5 years, 3 years. At that point, I think it is just such a devastating blow to, I think, the momentum and popularity of the show, that I don't think it's going to come back and be as popular as it could be. So I think they need to, when they have this announcement, really have it be a thing where like, okay, we're making the announcement now and it's coming within the next couple of months. Like, they can't have it take too long. I get the pandemic sort of hit pretty shortly after the whole season 3 thing, and they had to get renewed and confirmed for the rest of the run. But it has still been 2 years. And obviously, with me primarily being an Avatar channel, us Avatar fans are very familiar with a massive break and how it can affect a fandom, in that between Korra Book 1 and Korra Book 2, it was 15 months. This is longer than that already. That was huge. That had a huge impact on the fandom, those 15 months. In that, I definitely noticed, as someone who was basically running a fan site at the time, a lot of people just didn't come back, didn't see them on the site again, didn't really see them in the fandom again for the rest of Korra's run. That's what the loss of momentum can really do. And this one is already bigger than that. And combined with them also, I think, struggling to get the book stuff going, it is kind of telling that it's been nearly a year since like a lot of the last group of releases happened. And this is the sole book that's coming out in this sort of window, because the next book is the second graphic novel, which is coming out in April. That's a long way away. The expectations, I think, would be that, you probably should get the next season out before April. But we'll see what they do, because the book that I think people should be more interested in, like, if you don't have it already, get Through the Moon, because it's a proper new story. I've reviewed this on my channel before. It has actual like setup for season 4. If you read this, you'll have a sense for what some of the dynamics are going to be going into season 4. So, read this book and prioritize. I would say prioritize getting these 2 books, the Spell book and Through the Moon, rather than the novelizations, because I just think you're getting so much more from these than you are from the other books. There's also the Dragon Prince art book, which I think is also good. If you like art book style things, that's there for you as well. And again, I'd recommend that over these novelizations. So that's where I'm kind of really at now, as someone who is a fan of the Dragon Prince. I do content on my channel about the Dragon Prince, but I don't do sort of regular news updates about it in the same way that I do for Avatar and Korra. I'm very much like, can we please get to the show here? Because not every fan is even at the kind of intensity level that I'm at. And then I know there are fans who are like even more into it than I am. So there's a whole mass amount of people who probably are wondering, just where did the show go? What happened to the Dragon Prince? It's been so long. They need to build that momentum again. Because obviously they have the Book 3 Sky novelization. That's going to come out. They're beginning to create a bit of a kind of running thing with the novels. But they said there's going to be a video game, and there's still very little information on that. And, the whole premise in a way of Wonderstorm the Dragon Prince was that it was going to be this multimedia project, and so far 3 years into the Dragon Prince, it's what these 4 books, only really, you'd say, one of which is full new story. One of them is sort of just like a resource type book, and then the other book is just like an art book. It's pretty light on content so far. Now, I will say again, I haven't checked out any of the stuff about the role-playing game or anything like that, and I know there's, I think, some lore that relates to that, but in terms of the really obvious content, I think they've been a bit behind what I would have expected. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about the Book 2 Sky novel. Yeah, you know how I feel about it at this point. In terms of next Dragon Prince stuff, look, if there is the trailer, if they announce it before New York Comic Con or at New York Comic Con, I'll probably do some sort of a trailer analysis type thing. Depends on the quality of the trailer. Sometimes trailers can be very, very basic. There could be like no information in it. But I'm guessing by the time we're there and we finally have the trailer, there'll be enough to where, like, yeah, I'll want to talk about it. So, you know, I'll cover that just to kind of highlight that, hey, remember the Dragon Prince, finally season 4 is coming. Because it's meant to be, what, book 4, Earth, I think is the confirmation. I think we've known that for a while. It's going to be Earth. That's interesting, just to see how they incorporate that in as the kind of theming of it. But yeah, other than that, it's going to be like some sort of trailer analysis and then the reviews of the episodes whenever they are released. Because other than that, it's April for the next book. Like I said, the Blood Moon Huntress, the next graphic novel, which is, if I remember correctly, that is a backstory thing about Rayla when she was younger. Like, it's set before the series. I don't think it's set like a massive amount of time before the series, but it is before the series. So that could be interesting. We'll see how it goes. So yeah, that has been the video. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were. But that's been it. Thanks for watching, and bye.